Hi, I'm Sam. I've been climbing outdoors for a long time now, and we're here in Burbage South just to give you a bit of an introduction to some bouldering etiquette if it's your first time outdoors or if you just need a refresher. So one of the first things that it's really important to have a think about before you come outdoors is access. So whether that's your first time here at Burbage or Stanage or up in Yorkshire or down in Northumberland, always have a check of the access situation. It's a good idea to have a figure out if there's any information you need before you set out, whether there's parking situations, nesting birds, all that sort of things, and you can find the information really easily, whether it's guidebooks, on the internet, on the BMC. There's information everywhere to have a look at, but just make sure you check it. So you should always try park at the designated parking locations that's listed in the guidebooks or on UKC, just to make sure that the access is kept for other climbers around you and for people in the future. Always remember to be respectful of others when you're parking, so don't block driveways, keep an eye out for farmlands, don't go in front of gates, and just try not to park on verges if you can do. Always try use the actual designated parking areas. Quite often you're asked to pay in places such as Stanage, but that's just to help preserve the wildlife and the location around. So whether that's the paths, whether that's the vegetation, everything needs to be paid for. So by putting £2-3 into a machine really helps keep that situation active. So the code of ethics that climbers follow when they're bouldering or climbing outdoors puts a heavy emphasis on just respecting the rock. So the rock we climb on can be very delicate, especially when it comes to gritstone or sandstone. It's the softest sort of rock type, so you need to be really clear in following like just some general guidelines when you're coming outdoors. So one of the main things is do not under any circumstances climb on wet rock. So even if it's just been raining a day or two before, it can soak into the rock and really make the holes more brittle and erode far more easily, as well as it just being awful to climb. If it's wet, go indoors. Chalk's a great help for climbing, but once it's caked over holes, you lose all the friction and you shouldn't overuse it. So a little dusting on your hands before you climb helps, but then sometimes you just have to brush it off. Use a nice soft bristled brush, especially when it comes to rock like this, to preserve the rock as well as just to make it easier for you to climb on it. So often you'll see, especially in pictures, in videos, and when you're outdoors, there's little lines on the rock, so they're called tick marks. Sometimes they are helpful, sometimes you need a little one, but don't overdo it. And if you have to use it, try not to, but if you have to, make sure you brush it off afterwards. So another thing that you might not have thought about when you're climbing indoors is that when you're outdoors and you're in your climbing shoes, they'll get muddy or gravelly or dusty. Make sure you give them a good clean before you get on the rock, whether that's with your hand, whether it's with your trouser leg, whether it's with a little bit of cloth you bring, just to make sure it keeps it clean. That keeps the rock from eroding, it stops it getting polished. So one of my favourite things about coming outdoors climbing is just seeing all the beautiful nature and the countryside that we've got around us. But because we're out in it, that means we also have a responsibility for it. So one of the main things is you need to respect the countryside that you're in. What it all boils down to is leaving no trace. So when you leave an area, leave it as you found it. So when you walk into the crag, stick to designated footpaths. Generally, especially with places like this, most things will be easy to find by looking at the guidebook, looking on the internet, and follow the main footpaths to the areas. When you're leaving the crag, remember to have a check around to make sure you haven't left any rubbish, so whether that's finger tape, bits of your food wrapping, anything that you bring with you. Make sure you don't leave it when you leave your area, take it with you and leave no trace. So remember to respect the local wildlife and the flora and the fauna, and that links back to whether that's the path walking, whether that's the access situation. Make sure you have a check and have a look if what you're doing is respectful to everyone else that's using the crag, even if it's not humans. So always be considerate that there will probably be other climbers using the crag, so don't play loud music. So you need to consider if it's appropriate to bring your dog to a crag. So crags and nature is a great place to bring your dog. But sometimes when you're here, there might be people that don't like dogs, there might be people that are a bit scared of them. So having a stake to put your dog in and tie him up if he gets a bit rowdy, it's a good idea to have. Do not, whatever you do, light barbecues or fires on the moors, especially around now. When we're filming this, it's been really recent in the news that there's been quite a lot of wildfires because it's been so dry recently. So make sure that you don't take it out, do it in your garden, do it at home, but just don't bring it to the crag with you. So quite often in crags there will be local toilet facilities. If you do need to go, try use the local toilets, it's just nicer for everyone else. If nature does call, do it far away from the boulders. So bury the waste far away from the crags and the footpaths, and if you have to use toilet paper, make sure you take it away with you, don't leave it here at the crag. We're all out here to have a good time, and that means you need to be responsible in your own safety as well. So out here, out on the rocks, in the wild, it is different to being indoors. You've got to put your own crash pads down, you've got to preferably bring someone else just to give you a little bit of support and spotting when you're climbing. Just to make sure if you fall off, a nice spot on the back. It's not about grabbing them, it's not about stopping them falling, it's making sure they land in a safe way. Even with your best intentions, sometimes accidents do happen when you're out here. So make sure you bring a phone or tell someone where you are, what you're doing, how long you think you'll be before you set out, just in case the worst does happen. So even though this did seem like a lot of information to take in before your first trip out, also you need to remember that you're out here to have fun. That's the main thing, is even though there's all this information that you need to take in, you need to be mindful of, but make sure you have fun when you come out. So if you have any other questions or things you're not sure about before you head out, there's lots of places you can have a check. So in the Psyche website, there's a new blog post that's out on all the access information. It's basically what we've talked through now, but in a little bit more detail. There's also great resources on the BMC website, UKC, and your guidebook you go into the crag will have all the information you need before setting out.